It's October, so it's time to talk about horror in tabletop role playing games. There's a perception that Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder are poor choices to play a horror game. And for some types of horror, I agree. If you're doing John Carpenter's The Thing style game, then yeah, it's going to be a poor choice. If you want to do zombie survival fiction, then it doesn't really suit. One, three, even five zombies are not really a threat. You need 30, 50, 70 zombies. And the combat mechanics for Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder are not well suited to that kind of fiction. You could use minions, but that's going to feel a lot more like a Diablo 3 character whirlwinding through all these monsters. It's fun, it's just not really horrific. There are styles of horror that we can use in our games that would be appropriate. Gothic horror, psychological horror, suspense horror. Games like Dungeons and Dragons create larger than life heroes against larger than life monsters. And horror definitely has larger than life monsters. Dracula, Alien, even Vecna in Stranger Things is done in a horror aesthetic. And all those creatures are defeated by heroes in the end. What puts those stories into horror rather than action adventure is that until the very end, the characters never feel safe. They never feel like they're in control. The monster could come for them at any time, and there is nothing that they can do about it. They just have to survive until the end. I'm James. I've been a dungeon master for 25 years, and on this channel, I talk about all the things that I do for my players as I'm planning and plotting my tabletop role-playing games. If you like that kind of content, then there's buttons down there for like and subscribe. Let's make a horror adventure for our players. In order to do that, we need to find the mechanics that are creating an aesthetic that puts them in control, makes them feel like they're safe and that they can handle this situation, and then we need to neutralize it. Then we need to foster a sense of an unknown place. That around any corner there could be a monster, and if you encounter that monster, you're going to die because you can't handle this right now. Then we need to alter our pacing so that the players are constantly feeling like around the next corner could be the monster, but it's not there. It's somewhere else. Where is this thing? On paper, the games Resident Evil 1 and Doom have a lot of things in common. You're playing an authority figure, a member of STARS or a Space Marine. You have a gun. You are killing monsters. You can take more than one hit, but one of these is definitely a horror game, and one of them is a power fantasy. In Doom, they give you a lot of ammunition. As you kill monsters, you get more ammo and more health, encouraging you to go further into more monsters. You also get constant automatic checkpoints, where it's just going to save your progress for you. In Resident Evil, you get very limited health restores. There's only so many of these green herbs, and your saves are few and far between. You'll only have so many save ribbons, so you're encouraged to go further into more dangerous areas. But unlike Doom, where they are rewarding you for that by giving you more and more health and more ammo and all that kind of stuff, in Resident Evil, you're taking greater and greater risks. You're going to have to go back through this all again if you die. Dungeons and Dragons often fulfills a power fantasy for our players. They feel like they're playing powerful heroes, so we need to find a way to make that mechanically closer to Resident Evil than it is to Doom. And the Dark Souls games do this really well. You need to level up, which means you need more experience, and the monsters around you are not going to cut it anymore. So you have to find bigger, better monsters that have more experience. But that means going deeper and further away from your bonfire. And you only have a limited number of resources, the Estus or Crimson flasks. And that means that you're getting more and more danger. This is more risky, much like it was with the typewriter. They use the mechanics in the same way that Resident Evil did to make this medieval fantasy produce the same anxiety that a horror game does. Both use the limited number of resources and the distance between save points to create this descending curve. Resources decrease over time. In our games, those resources are their hit points and their magic spells, their abilities. And our save points are a long rest. So whatever we're going to do with our adventure, saving somebody, escaping this haunted house, destroying the ritual, it has to be done tonight. So there can be no long rest. I'm personally okay with the short rest because it is a limited resource. They're going to burn it and then it's gone. Take, for example, something like the sorcerer. If they take a short rest, yeah, they get some sorcery points back, but they only get that back the first time. Another short rest isn't going to do anything for them. So yes, they get a little bit of tension release going, I get some sorcery points back, but that's the only time I got them back. What happens if I need another short rest later? Nothing. You used it, it's gone. We also need to be very careful with the level of the character. Higher level characters have more options. Options make players feel powerful. Powerful characters feel like they're in control. Feeling in control feels like they're safe. I wouldn't go to level 3. I'd stick to level 1 or level 2. The level 3 characters started getting more options. Options make them feel powerful. We don't want that. Stick to the lower levels. And they have enough hit points that if a zombie or two manages to get a hold of them and starts biting at them, they can fight them off, but it's going to cost them some resources, and they are now down for the rest of the adventure, rather than being fully eliminated and having to sit the rest of the game out. That would be more like a slasher flick, and I would agree that Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder are ill-suited to that kind of fantasy. People feel safe when they're in a place that they're familiar with, something that they understand, their home, their street, their office, or their school. So we need to find a way to make the players feel like they don't really understand where their characters are, how this mansion, this dungeon, whatever it is laid out. Resident Evil uses the confusing corridors, the awkward controls, and the bad camera angles to try to confuse the player so that it's hard for them to navigate the mansion. In Dark Souls, there's lots of weird blind corridors and things that are hanging over edges and dark, ominous things, and even going through the mists to fight a boss, you can't see what's on the other side as you're trying to go forward. All that is done to make the players feel like they don't know exactly where they are and they're not completely comfortable with the environment. In our Dungeons and Dragons game, don't draw the map out for them. As much as possible, use theater of the mind. If you have to draw a tactical map for a fight, then that's fine, but erase it afterwards. If the players are going to try to make their own map, a sketch is perfectly fine. But if they're going to try to actually make a representation of the dungeon that is to scale in their character's piece of paper with some chalk or something, then that's going to take some time in game, and we need to discourage that. Use a random encounter. Shadows are great for this because their amorphous nature makes it hard for the players to completely understand what that thing is, and its abilities allow them to do hit and run tactics. And once you have deployed one, the players are never going to be completely sure that one isn't in the room with them right now. Horror movies and action movies have a similar pacing arc. They're just more drawn out in a horror movie in both axes. The pacing takes longer to get there, and the high is much higher, and the low doesn't go quite as low. In Alien, there's a lot of people going off alone, trying to explore the Nostromo to figure out what's gone wrong. As they go off alone, we start to feel tense, going, are they going to get them now? Are they going to get them now? When they turn this corner, is that when this is going to happen? Building up that tension is creating suspense, and that's where horror comes from. You can't raise the tension indefinitely. You got to let them off somewhere. Otherwise, they'll get used to that level of tension. They'll start becoming bored. It becomes a slog as they're waiting for something to finally happen. You don't want that. So I usually find that the first 4 or 5 rooms being empty of any sort of an encounter, whether that's talking or fighting something, is about right. They should find things in those rooms, signs of violence or signs that something is wrong. As you approach the bloodstain to inspect it, voices enter your head. You hear an argument. Someone yells for someone to flee, run away, and you hear them retreat towards the kitchen. Then there's a fight, and then a body hits the floor, and then heavy footsteps proceed after the fleeing victim. Now we need some sort of a tension breaker, so they're going to have to encounter something. You could use things like animated armors and animated objects. That's what they use in Death House from Curse of Strahd. Or you could use ghouls, skeletons, zombies, some consequence of whatever this evil monster is. Don't reveal the evil monster yet. You're still hunting that down. It's somewhere in the house, and the player should constantly wonder that. But we can have them face these other things, consequences of the monster's actions. You could have them talk to an NPC, but that NPC should be somehow unsafe, unstable. They are also a consequence of whatever this monster is doing, and there's a possibility that this could go badly for the players as they're talking to this individual. Another thing that horror constantly does is split the party, break somebody off from the rest of the group. Yeah, it's complicated as a dungeon master to run these 2 different combats, these 2 different groups. So don't do it for long. Let them get back together. But they are at their strongest when they're together. If you separate them, a little bit of panic will creep in. They don't know how long they're going to be separated. Is it just for this fight, or is it longer? Drop somebody down a pit. Use a secret door to turn somebody so they are in another room all by themselves. and let them face a small monster, a small threat, because the players don't know that that's what it is. And they will feel that little bit of panic. Some of that tension will start to build. And that's what we need to create our horror aesthetic. Whatever monsters that you're choosing, lean more towards monsters that are hard difficulty monsters, something where they are threatened. We don't need a lot of these. We just need enough that they're going to feel like they could die at any time. That is, again, part of that horror experience. You can drop a couple low-level monsters, something that's a medium encounter. But if you're going to do that, it should be for the strange, creepy factor of it. Horror and suspense come from emotions, and characters don't have emotions. Players have emotions. An adventure doesn't have to necessarily threaten the character's hit points to make the players feel like their character was under threat, to make them feel like they're not in control. Most Dungeons and Dragons Pathfinder kind of TTRPGs are focused around giving the players choices and making them feel like they're in control of their character's fate. But that is not what horror and suspense are about. They're about taking that away from the characters. You will have to enter this haunted house. You will have to enter this ship to deal with the aliens. And not every player is up for that. So talk with the players first. They need to feel like they're in a safe place to explore horror. When people go to see horrific movies, they go because they are ultimately safe. They feel like they're safe in the movie theater watching it with everybody else, and they can explore that feeling of adrenaline, that rush of dopamine that horror will give them, even though they're not really under threat. Do not assume that your player feels safe enough with you to explore those horrific themes. But if your table is up for a horror experience, then I put together an adventure for you. It's down the doobly-doo. My friend Zozo has edited it for me. Thank you very much, Zozo. We put it up on the DMs Guild as a pay what you want, so you can get it for free. It's about, well, I'm not going to tell you what it's about because that would be spoilers, and mystery is part of horror. Until next time, Dungeon Masters, remember, you're a player too. Try to have some fun.